Something is sitting in your kitchen right now that earthworms desperately want, and if you bury it in the right spot, in the right way, you can turn a sad, struggling patch of soil into a living, breathing ecosystem practically overnight. I'm not talking about expensive fertilizers or fancy amendments. This is something most people throw in the trash every single day. Here's what's wild. The earthworms were already there, waiting beneath your feet, but they needed a reason to show up and stay. Once you give them that reason, they'll do the hard work for you, aerating your soil, breaking down nutrients, and leaving behind castings that are worth more to your plants than almost anything you can buy at a garden center. The best part? The secret ingredient costs you nothing. And the method? It's almost embarrassingly simple. Stick around because once you know this, you'll never look at your kitchen the same way again. What to bury? Let's talk about what actually goes in the ground, because this is where most people either get it right or mess it up. The short answer is kitchen scraps, but not all of them. You want the stuff that breaks down relatively quickly and that soil organisms can actually use. Think vegetable and fruit peelings, banana peels, apple cores, the tops of strawberries, coffee grounds, used tea bags, not plastic but paper ones, crushed eggshells, and leftover cooked plain rice or pasta with no sauces or seasonings on it. Stale bread works too in small amounts. What you want to avoid burying, at least with this method, is anything with oils, heavy seasonings, dairy, or meat. These don't just break down slowly, they can attract the wrong kind of visitors. Rats, skunks, raccoons. None of them are welcome guests in a garden bed. Stick to the plant-based stuff and you'll avoid that problem entirely. One thing a lot of people still overlook: coffee grounds are pure gold for earthworms. Multiple studies have shown that worms are genuinely attracted to soil amended with coffee grounds. If you're a daily coffee drinker, you're already sitting on a renewable supply of one of the most worm-friendly materials on the planet. Same goes for used tea. Just make sure those bags are fully compostable, or you remove the leaves from a non-compostable bag first. The more variety you can add, the better. A mix of carbon-rich material, like shredded cardboard or torn-up paper bags, and nitrogen-rich scraps like vegetable peels creates a more balanced environment that breaks down faster and supports more microbial activity. If you can toss a small handful of shredded cardboard in with your scraps before you bury them, you'll see even better results. Now that you know what to bury, let's talk about the part that actually makes or breaks this whole method, and it's something almost nobody does correctly the first time. How to bury it. Depth and placement matter more than most people think, and getting this wrong is the fastest way to either waste your time or create problems you didn't bargain for. Depth. You want to bury your scraps at least 8 to 12 inches deep. That might sound like a lot, but there are two very good reasons for it. First, it puts a material below the foraging range of most surface level pests. Second, and this is the important one, it puts it right in the zone where earthworms are most active. Night crawlers and other deep burrowing species spend most of their time in that 6 to 18-inch zone, especially in moderate temperatures. You're essentially setting the table right where they're already sitting. If you only bury scraps 2 to 3 inches down, you're not just risking pest problems. You're also likely to have the material dry out before it fully breaks down, especially during warmer months. Trench versus hole. You have two main options here. A trench is exactly what it sounds like. You dig a narrow channel, maybe 6 inches wide and 10 to 12 inches deep, lay your scraps in a single layer along the bottom, and cover it back up. A pit or hole is more of a concentrated deposit. You dig down, drop in a concentrated batch of material, and refill. Both work well. Trenches are better for covering large areas systematically, Pits are great for targeting a specific tree, shrub, or struggling plant. Coverage. Once you've laid down your scraps, cover them with the soil you dug out. Firm it down gently, not packed hard, just enough to close the gap. You don't need to add anything on top or mark it with anything fancy, though a simple garden stake helps you remember where you've already worked. Coming up next, we're going to talk about how often to do this and how to set up a rotation system that keeps your entire garden improving all season long without you having to think too hard about it. How often and how to rotate. This is where people tend to overcomplicate things. The good news is that the timing and frequency are much more forgiving than you'd expect. A single trench or pit doesn't need to be revisited. Once it's buried and covered, leave it alone. The worms and microbes will handle it from there. What you want to do instead is think about rotation across your space. If you have a garden bed that's, say, 4 feet by 8 feet, you can mentally divide it into 3 or 4 zones. Start burying in zone 1. When that fills up, meaning you've added scraps to most of the available trench space, move to zone 2. By the time you cycle through all your zones and come back to zone 1, that first batch will have fully broken down and the soil there will be ready for another round. This typically takes 4 to 6 weeks, depending on temperature and material. How much should you bury at once? There's no strict rule, but a general guideline is to fill your trench or pit to about 1/3 full before covering. Packing it completely full slows decomposition because you need air pockets and soil contact for breakdown to happen efficiently. Frequency. Most gardeners doing this actively find that burying scraps once every week or two per zone keeps things moving nicely without overwhelming the soil's capacity to process material. If you're generating a lot of scraps, the rotation method means you never run out of space. You're just always working in a different part of the garden. One last timing note. This method works year-round in most climates, but it slows down significantly when soil temps drop below 50 degrees Fahrenheit. In cold climates, you can still bury through fall. The material will just sit dormant until the soil warms up in spring, and then the worms will get to work. But if you're not generating enough scraps to keep this going, that's a question I get asked a lot, and the answer might surprise you. Where to get more material? Not everyone makes a big pot of vegetable soup every week. If your household is small, or you just don't generate much kitchen waste, don't worry. There are some reliable ways to supplement without spending much, if anything. Coffee shops are the single best free source of coffee grounds that most people never tap into. The vast majority of coffee shops go through pounds of grounds every single day, and almost all of them will bag up the spent grounds for you if you just ask. Some shops actually set them aside proactively for gardeners. Call ahead, be friendly, and you might be surprised how quickly a 5-gallon bucket fills up. Local grocery stores and produce markets often have unsellable produce, bruised apples, wilted greens, overripe bananas that they'd otherwise throw away. Again, just ask. Smaller independent stores are usually more flexible about this than big chains, but it doesn't hurt to ask either one. Neighbors. This sounds almost too simple, but if you let people around you know that you'll take their veggie scraps, fruit peels, and coffee grounds off their hands, a surprising number of people will take you up on it. You're doing them a favor, actually. Community resources. Some neighborhoods and municipalities have community composting programs where organic material is collected and often redistributed. Check if your town has one. You may be able to access bulk material at little or no cost. Cardboard and paper. Remember when I mentioned mixing in carbon-rich material? Free cardboard is everywhere, behind grocery stores, furniture shops, appliance stores. Shred it, dampen it slightly, and mix it in with your scraps. It balances the nitrogen-heavy kitchen waste and helps keep things from getting compacted. You don't need an endless supply of material to make this work. Even a modest, consistent input will visibly change your soil over a single growing season. And that brings us to the part a lot of people want to skip, but you really shouldn't, because understanding the why behind this is what makes you stick with it. Why it works, and what it's actually called. Alright, let's pull back the curtain on what's actually happening underground when you do this. When you bury organic material, fruit peels, vegetable scraps, coffee grounds, cardboard, you're not just feeding the worms. You're triggering a whole chain of biological activity. The first responders are bacteria and fungi. They begin breaking down the raw material almost immediately, releasing nutrients in forms that plants can actually absorb. This process generates a small amount of heat and moisture, which acts like a beacon to earthworms. They can sense changes in temperature, moisture, and the chemical signatures given off by decomposing organic matter. They move toward it. As earthworms work through the material, a few things happen simultaneously. Their physical movement creates channels in the soil. This is what people mean when they say earthworms aerate the soil. These channels improve drainage in clay soils and help sandy soils retain moisture better. Their digestive process concentrates nutrients, and what they leave behind, worm castings, contain beneficial microbes, plant-available nitrogen, phosphorus, and a handful of other compounds that genuinely promote plant growth. Multiple scientific studies have found that worm castings can improve germination rates and plant vigor even in small concentrations. Here's the bigger picture. You're not just improving one patch of ground. You're building a living soil ecosystem. Worms that come to your buried scraps will stay and reproduce if conditions remain favorable. Over time, we're talking 1 or 2 seasons, you can dramatically increase the worm population density in your garden, which means the benefits compound. More worms mean better aeration, better water retention, and more nutrient cycling, all without you doing anything additional. This method has an actual name, trench composting. It's one of the oldest forms of composting known to humans. Some historians trace it back to ancient civilizations across multiple continents. The reason it fell out of favor is the same reason most sensible, low-effort things fall out of favor. At some point, someone decided to sell a more complicated version of it. But what you're doing when you bury scraps in your garden is, at the core, exactly what people have done for thousands of years to build fertile soil. No bins, no turning, no maintenance. Just bury it and let nature do the rest. Bringing it all together. Trench composting isn't glamorous and it's not complicated, which is exactly why it works so well. You're taking something you'd otherwise throw away, giving it back to the soil, and letting the worms and microbes do what they've been doing since long before any of us showed up. The payoff is real. Looser soil, stronger plants, and a garden that actually gets better the longer you do this. If you haven't tried it yet, start small. Pick one spot, dig down 10 inches, bury a week's worth of kitchen scraps, cover it up, and just wait. Give it 4 to 6 weeks and go back and check. What you find in that soil will probably convince you to do the whole garden. That's all for now. Subscribe to see more.